Hamas is just an expression of a deeper structural thing. Hamas is not an exogenous factor that came in from the outside somehow and now, like a pest infesting your home, has to be dealt with. They are a product of history. There will be a Hamas 2 and a Hamas 3 as long as hundreds of thousands to millions of people live under domination by a foreign power without political rights. And that's how those people are living. This is from Vladimir. Vladimir X. Shortly after the mass murder of Israelis by Hamas on October 7th, 2023, the two of you agree that the Israeli response constitutes a, quote, defense of Western values and civilization, close quote. 10 months later, with the apocalyptic destruction of Gaza, do you still feel that way? How many more Palestinians must be killed before you two will consider their humanity? Or do you believe Netanyahu, quote, they are subhuman animals, close quote? Okay, Vladimir X, I'm taking your word for it that Netanyahu actually said that. I can't confirm that here right now. And this question is put to both of us. John, you want to respond?
My response to that would be pretty quick. It's the toughest issue I know. But what it comes down to, I'm going to have to resort to something for educational purposes or rhetorical purposes that sometimes can seem like a cop-out, but I don't think it is. I grieve for the numbers of Palestinians, innocent Palestinians, who are being killed because of this issue larger than them, that their leaders put them into, using them as human shields, with these tunnels under all of these buildings. I am aware that there are isolated cases where the Israeli army could have acted better. That's just how war goes. But in general, from what I know, they are doing all that an army possibly could to avoid killing people needlessly. They're trying their best, although it's war, it can't be perfect. What it comes down to for me, Vladimir, is this. If we choose to say that, say, 50, 60,000 is too much under any conditions, and so this simply must stop, Hamas will do it again. Hamas cannot be allowed to do that again, is a feeling that I have, trying to imagine myself on both sides of this. They cannot be allowed to regroup and do that again, not for any reason. And so I would just have to ask you, Vladimir, is your position that we should make it so that Hamas actually could do that again and hope that negotiations would fix that, despite the fact that I don't think any of us really believe that any kind of negotiation would stop Hamas from wanting to do that again? That's a really tough question, and it doesn't lend itself to your understandable tone, which is, now have you seen enough? The question is, if we've seen enough, Hamas will do it again. And I'd like to know what you would do with that. Glenn, that's my answer to that question.
Okay, now here's my answer. By the way, I want to refer Vladimir X and anybody else who's interested to the post that I did in which I reflected at length on how I've dealt with the war in Gaza, both at the Glenn Show and elsewhere in my public ministry, giving speeches and so on. We'll link to that. I'll have the team link to that when we post this response. But I've addressed myself to this at length, greater length than I'm going to have the opportunity to do here. I want to respond to two aspects of Vladimir X's question. Do I think the Israeli response constitutes a defense of Western values and civilization? If I said that then, I don't recall saying that it constituted. I think I might have said its defenders will portray it as constituting a defense of the West. I think I might have said Israel is joined at the hip with the West and represents the West in its confrontation with the forces that are arrayed against it in the Middle East, and that's not just in Palestine. Do I think it constitutes a defense of what the response constitutes a defense of Western values and civilization? No, I don't, frankly. No, I don't. And I've tried to say in part why I think not, but I'll say it here. I think the response is excessive. I don't think what John wants can be achieved, guaranteeing that Hamas will never do it again without killing all of those people. And I think that that's a barbaric thing to contemplate doing, let alone to try to do. And I think, arguably, you can understand what's being perpetrated there as precisely that, killing those people. They're shooting fish in a barrel. This is not a war. This is a police action that is being perpetrated against a largely defenseless population. You say it's Hamas's fault because if they didn't use them as human shields, you wouldn't have to kill them. I think there is some logic in the fact that Hamas lies ultimately at the root of the problem here. But it's not something that just simply fell from the sky, and it's not going to be eradicated by a military action unless, of course, as I said, you kill them all. And I think that's too high a price to pay morally, and that's what I've said. So no. Furthermore, I think the cause on behalf of which it is being undertaken, that is the cause of the defense of the project of creating the state of Israel, the only Jewish state, has tension with Western values. It's not purely an expression of Western values. The ethno-political dimension to the historic movement that has culminated in the state of Israel defending itself now at war all of my life. I was born in 1948. The country has been at war all of my life, is partly an expression of Western democratic values, but it's partly an expression of values that will find no quarter in the political traditions of liberalism because they're rooted in ethnic identity and a state that's built around the idea of a peoplehood, which is decided by blood, and that's not a consistent expression of the values of the noblest values of Western political civilization, in my opinion. Having said all of that, this is hard. Does Israel have a right to defend itself? Yes, of course it has. Does Israel have a right to exist? Yes, of course it has the right to exist in peace with its neighbors. Is anything Israel does okay? No, not in my book. And should I want my country to stand behind Israel, right or wrong, regardless in the face of nearly unanimous world opinion to the contrary? No, I think we Americans should think for ourselves on this. And I think the expression of sentiment that Benjamin Netanyahu embodied when he spoke to a joint session of the United States Congress a month ago or so is not one that I would personally want to associate myself with.
Glenn, are you, this is a genuine question. Are you informed that in order to keep Hamas from doing that again, essentially all Gazans would have to be killed?
Well, no, I informed. That's an opinion of mine. That's a statement of my reading of the situation, consistent, I think, with what's going on right now. They will either have to be killed or cleansed. This is John Mearsheimer's argument, and I think there's merit in it. That the hearts and minds, we're going to re-educate the Gazans so that they are prepared to affirm the right of Israel to exist and live in peace with each other after all the water under the bridge, including this water that's now under the bridge. You see what's being done to those people is a pie in the sky. They're going to either have to be driven out or killed, or they're going to fight and resist to the end. And Hamas is just an expression of a deeper structural thing. Hamas is not an exogenous factor that came in from the outside somehow and now, like a pest infesting your home, has to be dealt with. They are a product of history. There will be a Hamas 2 and a Hamas 3. There will be an Intifada 3.0 and an Intifada 4.0 as long as hundreds of thousands to millions of people live under domination by a foreign power without political rights. And that's how those people are living.
I find myself thinking first, these crying mothers and children, and that they did not bring this on themselves, or they had no idea that they had, in terms of, having Hamas in office. This is not what they were planning for. And you have to really imagine what it's like to lose, even if it's not your life, your life, but also just your entire livelihood, the neighborhood you grew up in is now rubble, in the trauma of all of this and happening to so many people. And then I just run up against a wall that I don't know what to do with, which is, short of this, Hamas is explicitly devoted to getting rid of Israel, and it's not just rhetoric, they mean it. And okay, if not them, then some other organization that has the same historical grievance. And then the question is sorting out what the historical grievances are, which is extremely difficult. But they're going to keep doing that. And so the question is, Israel is supposed to deal with the people who are devoted to doing that. How do you do that in a humanistic way? Is there any way of doing it that won't be lambasted as an occupation and denying people their political rights? Where the issue is that people denied their political rights are ones who wish Israel didn't exist and are ready to use force to get rid of it, and showed that they will do something like that by what they did on October 7th, which is recorded with the people doing it with glee. What do you do about that? And what I do know is that there is no simple answer unless pacifism outranks absolutely everything in your view, which I get. But this is one where I find myself thinking, all those people dying, good God. But then otherwise, look at what their leaders are dedicated to doing above all else in life. I'm just saying it's hard. There isn't,
It's not just Gaza. What about the West Bank? It's not just the West Bank. What about Lebanon, Hezbollah?
Look at that.
It's not just the Palestinians. What about the Iranians? What about Iran? I've heard some stuff coming out of Turkey that makes my hair stand on end. I don't know how long the moderate regimes in Egypt and Jordan are going to stand against pressures from below to do something if you continue to slaughter those Palestinians in the tens upon tens upon tens of thousands. If you continue to produce martyrs and then hide behind this thing about Hamas uses them as human shields, you're slaughtering those people. You don't have any responsibility for that. In conversation with people, friends of mine, I've been reminded of the U.S. use of firebombing in Dresden during the end of World War II to defeat the Germans, and of the atomic weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki to defeat the Japanese. To which my response is basically, you might be able to convince me that those actions were necessary given the tactics of war, necessary to defeat the enemy. You'll never convince me that they were anything other than crimes against humanity, notwithstanding what might have been their necessity. They slaughtered innocents in the boatload. You have blood on your hands. You're drenched in blood. Blood is dripping from your hands. It's not my fault. It's the other guy's fault. I had no choice. If you can sleep with that, okay, go on to sleep. I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's not my fight.
I change my thoughts on this every week, but my insistence is there is no, well, all I know is there is no, well, there is no, I told you so. There is no arms crossed. So how about this? It's too complicated. It's just too complicated.
Okay, well, we can agree on that. And on the fact that there's no pat answer, and the fact that any kind of honest answer requires courage to be willing to say it out loud because it's bound to offend. I noticed that the Democrats at that Love Fest didn't have a voice of Palestinians. They had a voice of Israeli hostage surviving families, but not of any of the Palestinians who were suffered. They genuflected or gestured at some kind of sympathy for Palestinians, but I don't think they stuck their necks out.
They did not.